All right, greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here, or Adams van Sail, here to shine a light on the goings on at the southern tip of Africa. And joining me tonight to help me with that spotlight is someone who I think my audience by now recognizes quite easily. He's been a guest for many years on my channel, and this year especially has been on my channel often because his knowledge, not just of South Africa, but the interplay and dynamic between South Africa and the United States has been invaluable in a year where that dynamic has been on the front page, and that is Colonel Chris Wyatt. Chris, welcome back on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thanks, Ernst. It's a pleasure to be back once again. I think I forgot about this. I was going to have people come over and bomb me with super chats, but your channel is no longer monetized, I understand.
It is now again. I've reactivated the monetization.
All right. Well, there you go, Wyatt Army. Feel free to send some super chats and make his day. I remember a couple years ago when I'd heard the astounding story that your incredible channel had never received a payout from YouTube. I just couldn't believe that. And so we conspired on my channel to come over to your channel, and I think it was like a 10,000 Rand day or something like that. It was huge.
Yeah, I remember that. It's still up on my channel. I can't remember exactly what the title was, but if you just search Conscious Caracal Chris Wyatt, you'll find all the episodes where we talk. And there's one with a thumbnail that has like a braai fire on it, and that's the one where we had that chat. It was a very nice evening, and your audience was very generous and kind. But Chris, 2025 has been a year where, as I said, your particular expertise and knowledge on the relationship between the United States and South Africa has come in quite handy and has been quite relevant in a year where that relationship has been at the forefront of not just what people are talking about in South Africa, but actually what people are talking about in the United States in regards to international policy and geopolitics of the Trump administration. And that's why I wanted to talk to you here tonight, or invite you as a guest here to do a little bit of a retrospective on the year that was. There was many things that happened. I'm not going to do an exhaustive list on or even a chronological list. I'm just going to go through some of the major happenings. We can look back in the rearview mirror in regards to how impactful they were, and maybe some interesting insights for the audience in regards to why these things are important. But I first want to just start off and get your thoughts in regards to just the year as a whole. Would you say that it is a fair assessment that the South Africa-United States relationship has never in recent memory been as bad as it is at the moment, or the strain at least?
Well, I would say publicly that's true, but privately the relationship has been this bad for the past 5 years, at least, maybe 10 years. And in fact, I've talked a lot about this. You know, this fractured relationship with the U.S. and the ANC goes back many, many years. As a member of the Defense Forces, I remember quite clearly when South Africa refused to sign an Article 98 waiver for the International Criminal Court, which was something that protected our soldiers when they went to do training, exercises, and events with the South African military, so that we wouldn't be abused and hauled before the ICC on trumped up charges, pardon the pun. But that's really when this relationship began to go sour, and it's gotten worse over time. Then South Africa introduced a anti-mercenary law, which was intended to prevent former South African Defense Force members and SANDF members from serving as security consultants in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was
Chris?
That was in the 2004, 2005, 2006 timeframe. That anti-mercenary law was a bizarre law that was written so that if you served in a liberation movement, that wasn't considered to be a mercenary or a criminal act. So you could blow people up as a terrorist if you're a freedom fighter, that they designated freedom fighters like MK. But if you worked as a consultant for a security firm in Iraq, you could be arrested. And the law was so broadly written that if you work for instance, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, you could be charged under that law. Now, that law kind of fell by the wayside, but that really soured relations because the U.S. came to rely very heavily on 10 or 15,000 South Africans who were in Iraq in particular, but also in Afghanistan, helping with security services where there weren't sufficient military personnel. And those people made very good salaries, brought tons of tax revenue back to South Africa, and kept the economy flowing because of that. And so that also soured the relationship. And it's just gotten worse and worse. The 75% tariffs on our poultry imports to keep us out of the protected market in South Africa, the ban on our pork imports. We have the best pork products in the world and the biggest market in the world. The quotas on our automobiles, while we give South Africa duty-free access to our country for 25 years. This has been brewing for a long time, and they all want to make it about Trump. Now, publicly, Ernst, I would agree with you that publicly it appears that it's never been at a lower level, at a nadir like this. But I'm telling you, behind the scenes, having worked in the diplomatic world and in government, that it's been this way for many, many years. It's just that politicians have been unwilling to bring it out to the front. The difference is, homie, don't play that. Trump is not going to sit back and pretend that things are good. He's going to tell you the emperor's wearing no clothes, especially when the emperor comes to the Oval Office and lies. Mr. President, I've never seen that before. Have they told you where it's at? It's in South Africa, genius. Anyway. So
Ramaphosa really made Trump look like a South Africa expert by just giving him that easy opportunity there to look like a genius. When it comes to particularly that contrast there, we'll get to that meeting. I mean, that was one of the highlights that I have here in my notes that we have to discuss. But it all really kicked off in 2025, I think, there in February, just about a week after it was announced that the Expropriation Act had been signed. And little beknownst to us at the time, it already had been signed in December 2024, but it only had really been made public in 2025, in February. And that was almost like the catalyst for almost the signal, I think, to the Trump administration that, well, these guys are going forward with all of their anti-private property rights policies. They're pushing forward, doubling down with their race laws. We're going to have to bring this or shine a light on it. And then we saw the executive order being signed by President Trump. And that was really where the cat was thrown into the pigeon coop, in the sense that really started this whole diplomatic crisis, as you explained, that has been going on for a while, but that really went public in 2025. And that's been a slow burning fire, burning hotter and colder at certain times throughout the entire year. But Chris, what were some of your thoughts when you initially saw that executive order being announced pertaining to South Africa?
Well, let me go back for just a moment. You are
Sure.
correct that President Ramaphosa was deceitful and dishonest, and there's a reason why he did that. Under South Africa's constitution, members of parliament, if you have 1/3, I think the total is 1/3 of parliament, can object to a bill that's been signed into law within 30 days of it being published by the president. And if they do that, then the Constitutional Court must review the law and make a determination on whether it is in fact constitutional. So it's a rapid way to get it's like having an express lane to the U.S. Supreme Court. So if President Trump signs a law and we don't have this, but if 1/3 of Congress says, hey, that's not constitutional, we don't agree with it, even though it had passed the legislature, but enough people opposed it, 1/3, then it'll go before the Supreme Court. That would be the case in South Africa. But Ramaphosa deceitfully pretended to sign it at Davos for big fanfare. That was insulting to the U.S. to sign this expropriation nonsense in Davos. This is the center of free market conversations, Davos, the big global economies. I know that it is a World Economic Forum led thing, but people look at it as the big capitalist economies going there. So that really started the whole mess. And then Trump comes into office, and of course, he talks about that, and then he sends this executive order. Now, I think most people know that I went live just 2 hours after that executive order on a Friday. We've discovered that it's funk around and find out Fridays, to use better language, FAFO. That's what Fridays have become. In fact, last Friday was the same thing. Trump announced nobody's coming to the G20 summit. He seems to like to make these announcements Friday afternoons, particularly for South Africa. But that really got this
ruin the weekend for the ANC carders, it seems.
That seemed to be the case, but that's really where this all started publicly, and it's gotten worse and worse. The South African government continues to lie to the public. The media continue to uncover, whether it's News 24 or the Daily Maverick or the Independent Line. The list of Ferraias, betrayers to South Africa, is epic. It's epic. They're everywhere. And the irony is they're calling other people who are standing up for South Africans, black, white, and brown, to be betrayers and traitors. But this is when it started, was when that EWC thing was signed. And under the law, South Africa should have been booted out that very moment from the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. One of the key tenets, one of the agreements that countries agree to when they get the preferential trade access through AGOA is respect for private property rights. By expropriating property with nil compensation, whether you do it or not, simply passing a law enabling it makes you ineligible. In fact, debating it in the parliament made them ineligible, in my view, since 2018. But South Africa was allowed to stay in AGOA, and the ANC politicians figured, well, it doesn't matter what we do. We'll keep pushing, we'll keep pushing, we'll keep pushing. Eventually, they ran into a wall, and that wall is Donald Trump. And homie, don't play that game.
And as I said, I'm going to skip over a lot of the things that happened in between. But the other thing that also stood out was the warning signs that Donald Trump was not going to attend the G20 was already early in the year being signaled. Secretary of State Marco Rubio already making a post on X in February, if I remember correctly, saying that criticizing South Africa heavily for its human rights abuses and for the Expropriation Act, mentioning G20. And then there was already many preliminary G20 meetings throughout the year. And as I understand it, Chris, US representatives have not been going to most, if not any, of those preliminary meetings.
Well, there has been some attendance, a little bit from DC, but mostly it's been embassy personnel who are already in South Africa, who have connections there with the diplomatic community, who've been attending on behalf of the administration. But no, there's been no high level engagement. And that's because the South Africa has done exactly what we expected. Now, the U.S. government has not mentioned this, but the reality is South African government has perverted the purpose of the G20. The purpose of G20 is not global solidarity. It's not, uplifting poor African countries. The purpose of G20 is to coordinate economic activity between the world's largest economic powers, which is, I've argued for years, the G20 is an absolute joke. It should be the G7. It never should have been enlarged. This is ridiculous, including China and Russia in a group like that. And I know Russia's suspended now, but the point is that, in South Africa, Walmart has 150% of the economy. One company in America of the entire country of South Africa. Walmart, $648 billion in sales last year. South Africa's GDP is less than $400 billion. Put that in perspective. And Walmart employs 2.1 million people who make a living and survive off that and get stock options and health insurance. What is South Africa? It employs 1.4 million people, and many of them barely getting by except for the caterers. So this has been going on for a long time. And the fact that the officials didn't go should have sent the message. But instead, the ANC continues to lie in the press. Oh, yes, we're on the verge of an agreement. We're negotiating with the administration. No, you're not. There's nobody here. That's just pure fiction. Where are they at? Well, Ronald Lamola and Parks Tao and John Steenhuisen are in Vietnam doing the Lamola, the robot dance, proving that not just white men can't dance, but apparently black men can't dance either. It's ridiculous. And they're in Vietnam arguing to sell a couple crates of stone fruit to Vietnam or China when they should be working with their most important trade partner, who's imposed a 30% tariff on them. But of course,
you could say, Chris, they're going for the low hanging fruit there.
Yeah, no pun intended. I got you. Low hanging fruit. Yeah. Well, the low hanging fruit tends to be the stuff that's rotting because it's heavier. No, this is insane. The United States is South Africa's most important trading partner. And then people are going to refute, no, but China's the biggest. It doesn't matter. China's buying coal. China's buying timber. China's buying iron ore. They're not buying cars from South Africa. They are buying some food. But the U.S. buys automobiles. That the ore is dug up in South Africa. The steel is made in South Africa. The parts are made in South Africa. The car is assembled in South Africa. And then the whole beneficiation of the value chain is in South Africa. That is incredible. That's what you want, not shipping commodities. I mean, that's why Africa's a mess. Ivory Coast is still a cocoa country after 60 years. Houphouët-Boigny turned it into a cocoa country, which was great until commodity prices swooned. You have to have a diversified economy. And South Africa is regressing. All the ferrochrome smelters are closing. The last one is open, is about to close. The economy is collapsing. And you're not getting beneficiation. You're just shipping your heritage, your wealth to China. They make money off of it, whereas America buys finished goods. And so that's a major problem. Yeah, anyway.
And then the next event on the timeline that stands out to me is then in February, Solidarity and AfriForum send a delegation to the United States. We meet with the White House, senior Trump administration officials in the White House. And that's the second time where the South African media complex just completely erupts in screams of misinformation. That seems to be the buzzword of 2025. Back in my day, we just accused people of being liars, and I'm not even that old, but it seems like now if you want to sound smart, you accuse them of misinformation or disinformation. I'm a bit more old school. Just call someone a liar if you think they're spreading falsehoods. But that also exposed again the close relationship between many in the media in South Africa and the South African government, particularly the ANC, where they were pushing this narrative of now this is all AfriForum and Solidarity's fault that the United States is taking action and putting pressure on South Africa, as if AfriForum and Solidarity have a direct WhatsApp line to Donald Trump and send him a message telling him, "Hey Donnie, I think we've got a good idea for you this year," and then he's like, "Well, that sounds like a fantastic idea. I think I'll do it." But also going on the premise that not just the ANC who's stuck in the Cold War, but also the media complex in South Africa seems to be going on the premise that the United States and the Trump administration do not have access to the internet. They seem to be, you can just fool them, or that Donald Trump is looking at his personal, as I saw a journalist make this, so it's not an exaggeration. I saw a journalist make the claim that Donald Trump is probably looking at his Facebook feed and deciding on his foreign policy decisions based on what he's seeing on his Facebook feed. And then the implication is that he's being misled by what he's seeing on social media, as if he does not have access to probably the most powerful information gathering machine in the world.
Well, having been a member of the most powerful information gathering system in the world, the U.S. intelligence community, I can confirm that while the U.S. doesn't know everything, we sure know a lot more. You can ask anyone who's now in the process of getting refugee status to come to America. When they go to their interviews, many of them have been shocked that the people asking them questions know more about those people being interviewed than they even remember about themselves in many cases. And if we know that about individual people who are nobody of any import or notoriety whatsoever in South Africa, or applying to come to America as a refugee because we're doing our due diligence, imagine what we know about South African criminal intelligence, the SANDF, the South African politicians, what's going on there. We're fully informed. My country is, I should say, not me, but I mean, I am on my own, but the intelligence community is fully informed. And to make such ludicrous statements shows that these people aren't journalists. They're propagandists. That's what they are. They're not actual journalists. And I just saw this again. Jan Gerber just had an article, and in the article published on the news page in the politics section, he says on the ironically titled Truth Social website that he owns, okay, that is not news. That is opinion. It belongs on the op-ed pages, but it's disguised in news. And the list goes on and on of many other things in there. It's just his opinion. Nobody cares what Jan Gerber's opinion is. If he wants to be an opinionista, get on the opinion page. You're supposed to be a journalist reporting the news. You're not. You are sharing your opinion, and we don't care about your opinion because you're a bought and paid for ANC apparatchik. It's obvious. It's obvious.
Right. But I think also on a positive note, we've been focusing on a lot of the absurdities and negativities. But on a positive note, we saw decentralized diplomacy in action this year as well, which is not illegal. It's not treacherous. It's not traitorous to represent your organization and your members abroad and going to those countries where the countries whose foreign policy is affecting your members, as the Solidarity Movement and AfriForum members are deeply affected by decisions made by the United States, and to represent them then by meeting with the most influential people within that other country that you get meetings with that are willing to talk to you. And it's again, once again, the desperate framing here of this being somehow treasonous and not just a healthy function of how a civil society organization operates was once again quite astonishing.
Well, I wouldn't call it that. What I would call it is the intentional character assassination. That's what's going on here. What is going on? The death of 1,000 cuts by calling Flip Bice and Dirk Herman and Jaco Kleinhans and others, and Kali Creole from AfriForum, calling them treasonous and filing a charge against them by the bogus MK party, which is not a political party. It's a joke. It's a vanity project for Jacob Zuma. I mean, even disgraced former Western Cape High Court Judge John Schlope can't hold his position in that party. They suspend more people than Carter's got liver pills. It's insane. But that was a bogus claim. This is all meant a character assassination. If you call someone a racist, if you call call them treasonous, then enough people believe it if you say it often enough. That's what the purpose of that is. It's to undermine the credibility of your opponent. Now we're seeing Adrian Basson and others going in and talking about the history of Kali Creel. He was in the Conservative Party during apartheid. Therefore, he's suspect. And here's two other things that are happening that it's part of the character assassination. Now we see that was it Parkstow, or I'm trying to remember if it was Parkstow. I think it was, or it may have been, anyway. But recently, one of them in the ANC said that the white genocide narrative, or it was Ryan Lamola, is akin to Afrikaner persecution. Now they're trying to take the white genocide narrative, which they gin up, which they talk about. AfriForum has never said that. I've never heard them say that. Now Kali Creel's come out and said exactly what I've said. They've never said that. This is an invention of the political left, and they blamed it on the right, just like white monopoly capital and Bell Pottinger. This is cooked up fake nonsense lies to influence people. It's influence operation. It's strategic communications. It is utter nonsense. And now they're trying to equate white genocide, which they made up to discredit Trump and discredit conservatives in South Africa and white South Africans, with Afrikaner persecution, because that's the term being used. What they're avoiding here is 145 race-based laws. That's what they're avoiding here. They're ignoring that. They try to say statistics don't matter, aren't supporting things. But the reality is, I've exposed the South African Police Service as fraudulent reporting murders. I got a farm murder in Brits, friend of mine, father-in-law, tortured in May of this year, after I came back, or it was in June, tortured for 12 hours, left to die in a wheelchair, had a hip operation in his late 70s, died 3 days later in hospital. Police report, house robbery. That was trespassing. That was assault with a deadly intent. That was attempted murder. That was torture. That was larceny. That was so many other crimes committed. House robbery. And then it's categorized. There are no farm murders. It's a lie. It's a lie. And the thing is, it doesn't just affect white South Africans. That's what's so reprehensible about it. Farm managers, farm workers are also attacked and murdered. But they don't want to report that because they're just dyed-in-the-wool racist. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, that's why AfriForum in our farm murder stats, we include all victims of farm murders, no matter what their race is. It are the critics of AfriForum, and well, rather, I think their defining characteristic is not that they're critics of AfriForum, but rather that they PR mechanisms for the ANC, and specifically the Ramaphosa faction, is the fact that they create these straw men, and then they very dramatically destroy and tear apart these straw men in public and pretend like they've had this major victory against the evil misinformation spreaders. But Chris, then on that note of these just falsehoods versus reality, the next event chronologically that happened that really put that contrast into the brightest spotlight possible was when Ramaphosa and his little team showed up at the White House to talk to Mr. Trump and his team and explain themselves. And I remember very specifically that week in the build-up to this meeting, I was on CakeNet. I was on a panel discussion there. And I don't think this was a very genius prediction on my part at all. It was pretty much just a common sense thing to say. I said on that show that the South African delegation going to the White House should be careful to not go there to try and lecture Donald Trump and think that he is some type of idiot. And I made the example. I asked, what will the South African delegation do if Donald Trump starts presenting evidence to them? Never in my wildest dreams did I think Donald Trump was going to have a whole cinematic experience that he's going to subject them to. I thought maybe he's going to show some pictures. Maybe he's going to reference one or two cases of farm murders. Maybe he's going to play one video on a cell phone or on a tablet. I did not think that the lights were going to be dimmed and there's going to be a massive screen just blaring and projecting out ugly realities of South Africa to a South African delegation locked in a room with Donald Trump with nowhere to hide in front of the world's cameras.
Well, and that's the problem here, Ernst, is that they've gotten away with it so many years of being arrogant and lecturing to people and telling people they just don't understand, and you're anti-transformation. This is to right the injustice of the past, even though they're punishing people that weren't even alive then. The majority of white South Africans were born after the end of apartheid and lived only under ANC rule, yet they must suffer the consequences. That's collective guilt, and that's morally reprehensible. Yeah, this was a debacle, and the South African media ran cover. Anneke Larsen asked the question, and this should have been the headline. Anneke Larsen said, Mr. President, now that President Ramaphosa has come here, do you still believe that there's a white genocide in South Africa? To which Donald Trump said, I'm not convinced of that. That should have ended the whole white genocide. And as you say, now I also it warned ahead of time. I almost pleaded, because the ANC watches my content. They've got people watching. I'm not stupid. I know that. And I almost pleaded with them, do not go there and lecture. Do not do a song and dance. Just be on. Whoops. Just be honest.
Just knock something over. It's fine.
Just be honest with the President Trump. And what did they do? They had to, show off, and he had to do a song and dance. So another question was asked, and Ramaphosa, like a fool, says, Mr. President, let me answer that question. And he does a song and dance. The whole thing was embarrassing. And the South African media ran cover saying that Ramaphosa was ambushed. Ambushed, he asked for the meeting. They begged for the meeting. Trump rearranged his schedule so that he could take the South Africans. And these people in the ANC are stupid. They think that people aren't that bright. It's like they're running around now trying to equate things like Afrikaner persecution with white genocide, and lying to people. It's like taking 6-year-olds and having to go practice student government. That's what's happening here. This is insane. In
the build-up, Chris, the Trump administration had been telegraphing what issues they were going to be discussing. They couldn't have been more clear in regards to what the issues on the table were going to be.
Well, and in fact, our embassy met with Durko before they went to help prep them for the trip. People don't talk about that because that's not some people to be in. But yeah, they when they were asked to talk to them, they talked to them, and they said, "Hey, listen, this is what you can expect in Washington." So they knew what to expect. They just thought they could dance for the cameras and that Trump would just be polite. See, here's the thing.
Then Trump was just stone cold serious.
Here's the thing with Europe and with America until Trump this time, even Trump last time. South Africans know they can play the race card. And many people are afraid of being called a racist, even though they're not racist, because of the damage it does. Trump doesn't care. He's been called a racist a million times, and the guy's not a racist. So he's not going to sit there. He's never going to serve again. This is his last term. He can't serve again. He knows that. He's got a limited amount of time to get things done. His timeline, it's almost like he had a playbook. He came in office day one. Let's piss off the liberals by doing this. Day two, we're going to piss off the liberals here. This is what we're going to do. Boom, 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 boom. We're going to threaten to buy Greenland. Then Denmark will freak out. Then they'll actually put ships around there, which is what we want. We'll get Panama to stop selling the canal zone to the Chinese. That's what they wanted. So it's almost like he had a playbook. South Africa came into the mix because of the actions of Ramaphosa. Had EWC not been signed in Davos, we wouldn't be talking today about Afrikaner refugees. We wouldn't be talking about an abysmal relationship. It would still be a quiet diplomatic situation. The South African government lied to South Africans and to the Americans about the Lady R. That's a story never talked about except on my channel, from a standpoint that the United States government quietly, diplomatically approached the South African government to ask, why was the Lady R in Simonstown? It's a sanctioned ship. I know South Africa hasn't sanctioned it, but the U.S. has sanctioned it. And if you want a good relationship with us, we want to know why that ship was here. And they lied. For 5 months, they ignored the American embassy. Ruben Brigady, for 5 months, patiently engaged with Durko. What's going on here? Can you tell us? And this is what they did. They just said, talk to the hand, not the face. And so after 5 months, Brigady had the press conference, and then they denied it. They assigned some retired judge and made up some report saying there was nothing to see. But people have video evidence. People saw the crates. It was in Simonstown. I've stayed in lodges. I can look down on the base. Don't even need a pair of binoculars. They think people are stupid, probably because they're stupid.
Yeah. Chris, I want to ask you a question as just a member of the American public, not as someone with a deep knowledge of South Africa or the relationship between the two countries. How do you personally think the American public perceived and experienced that meeting, specifically seeing that fiasco unfold on their television screens for everyone to see?
Well, I think it depends on where people sit politically. Leftists deluded themselves into Trump ambushed Ramaphosa, which is nonsense. Right. Trump, I don't think Trump was going to show the video. He didn't show the video until he got annoyed. He got interrupted twice. Then he showed the video. All he was going to do, I think, was show the articles, news articles. So most of the American public that had interest in it paid attention. If they're right of center, they were appalled at Ramaphosa and endorsed Trump. If they're left of center, but other Americans who are just kind of middle of the road, really didn't pay a lot of attention to it. It's not, I mean, look, people know I love South Africa and South Africans, but South Africa just doesn't matter. This isn't 1985. We don't need the strategic minerals from South Africa. We can get them elsewhere for the most part, with a couple exceptions. And those we can still get on the spot market buying from third parties. So it's not the end of the world. The people are like, but the passage around South Africa, nobody stops in South Africa. You have the 78th worst performing ports in the world. Of 78 countries that export around the world with major ocean ports, South Africa ranks 78th, not by the Americans, but by others. Can one of the mods take care of that? Thank you. I just saw that pop up. The guy did that on my channel too. Thank you for that mod. Yeah, so your ports are terrible. The ships, if they don't go through Suez Canal, simply sail right past South Africa. You know, if your ports were functioning, they would port call there. They'd stop and rest and refit, just like the Dutch did from the East India Company. But nobody stops there anymore. They just go, oh, look, it's South Africa. Let's go right past it. There is no geostrategic value to South Africa whatsoever. It's not a bulwark against communism. Hell, it's run by communists.
Right, but Chris, in regards to the Simonstown the Simonstown relevance to global security and to the American military interest, isn't there an angle to make South Africa relevant and important to the United States?
Well, in fact, Joel Pollack made that argument in his bid to become the ambassador to South Africa. It didn't work out for Joel. Went to Brent Bozell. Didn't work out for me, but then I don't know anybody, so it was never going to work out. You know, I would argue against that point. Unless the Chinese get basing rights, it's not an issue. We don't need South Africa to do what we're doing. We have Diego Garcia on the other side in the Indian Ocean. That's not going away. That's a strategic base for the U.S. that we leased from the Brits, even though they turned much of the Chagos back over. But we don't need it. It's not critically important. Yes, it would be advantageous to have access to Simonstown, but frankly, it's not big enough. You can only dock a couple ships there. I mean, you know, we travel in fleets. You know, we travel in battle groups. We travel in carrier strike groups. They can't handle that. So while the argument's made by people that know nothing about military operations, there is value, but it's limited value. And there's no need for it whatsoever unless China becomes a threat. China is operating around Africa, and that is a challenge. But we can counter that with a base elsewhere in West Africa, and there are places that would offer that to us. Liberia being one of them, but Liberia is not ideal because it's port. But the point is that the geostrategic value of Cape Town and Simonstown is not as big as a lot of pundits tell you. And a funny thing, most of the people that are advocating or pushing that point are politicians or columnists. None of them have any military experience.
And then before we continue, I just want to highlight some super chats that we did receive. Thank you very much to your audience and to Chris for highlighting the fact that the super chats are open. Debbie Fox gave 140 Rand and says, good evening, Conscious Caracal and Chris Wyatt. Thank you very much. Leuven Janssen van Rensburg, also a regular here on my channel, says, ja, Erns, ons doen wat die we do what the colonel said. Also 140 bucks. Gesiggie says, here you go, 14 Rand. Thank you very much. John Spence says, go Mr. Van Sale, 70 Rand. Thank you very much. And then WC says, this was not a super chat, but it was an interesting question or comment that I saw earlier. WC says, a friend of and I will be in Cape Town in late February 2026. What are some places and things that are must-see to do there while there? From my side, I would recommend you go see the Afrikaans language monument, the Taal monument in Parel, just outside of Cape Town. And then also, it's a bit less glamorous or tourist heavy, but go just see some small countryside towns that aren't too commercialized or tourist heavy already. I think that's also a very nice experience. And also I would recommend go see the French Huguenot monument in Franschhoek, but Franschhoek is a lot of tourists during the holiday season, so it's going to be busy. But that would be my two recommendations. A lot of stuff to do in Cape Town as well. Chris, do you have any recommendations for him on what to see in Cape Town or around Cape Town?
Absolutely. Kirstenbosch is a must-see. Botanical Gardens at Kirstenbosch. The Rhodes Monument, which is up on an elevated position. You can look out over the entire Cape Flats and Cape Town, and to the north, you get some fantastic views there. That's two places to go. The Victoria and Alfred Waterfront, of course, for shopping. Beyond that, I would also recommend, I would also go along with Franschhoek, go to the Huguenot Museum there, but they have strange hours, so check online before you go. Also, is it Johann Rupert or one of those guys has the Auto Museum in Franschhoek? You should go there. That's an incredible auto museum. Check it out. Babylon Storen, And so so you got Paarl with the Tal Monument. Then there's an Afrikaans museum in Paarl, and then you can go to Babylon Storen, drive to Franschhoek, go to Huguenot Museum, and then you can also go to the Car Museum that's located there on the way back, and then drive back through the pass that cuts through where Zorgvliet is at. It's a wine estate. You could stop there and have a lovely lunch or dinner or stay overnight at Zorgvliet. And then, of course, you can go on to Stellenbosch if you like. But that's stuff right in that concentrated area. There's a lot to see there. Somerset West has some nice things to see. Beyond that, there's quite a bit to see in Cape Town. So go to Century City for the big shopping experience there if you want to do that as well. A canal walk, that's lovely. There's a lot to see in Cape Town, a lot to do. And then if you have time, go down to Simonstown to see the penguins, the jackass penguins. They call them African penguins now, but they're jackass penguins. Go see the jackass penguins. And you can also visit Simontown's naval base if you're there on the right day at the right time. So those are all things to check out. And if you're curious, of course, you want to go up to Table Mountain. But my recommendation is be very careful. When you get up at Table Mountain, if you're by yourself, when you're wandering around, be careful because there are muggers up there. And people get mugged in broad daylight up there. And they know how to get away from you, run away. And you'll never catch them. And you suddenly be without a phone or without a wallet or something like that. And also, women get sexually assaulted up there sometimes. That happens too. So you just have to be very security conscious. And I think that's the main stuff. There's tons of other things you could do, but those are things that keep you out of trouble, and you see some natural beauty, and you can meet some nice people. Now, if you're venturesome like me, I recommend a trip to Khayelitsha and Monenberg.
And as I said earlier, if you have a lot of time, go visit some of the smaller towns there in the countryside. Lowbrow has some nice recommendations there. Hopefield, Ribbekasteel, the Riebeek Valley is a beautiful place. Philadelphia, Darling, a lot of those towns. Definitely go visit them if you have enough time, because it will be quite a drive. It's going to take you a lot of time because you can.
Well, yeah, I was trying to keep the distance down. Someone just mentioned Betty's Bay. Betty's Bay is fantastic, but it's a bit of a drive. You've got to go past Gordon's Bay Drive, and fortunately the road's been repaired. But I went, and the road was washed out. They were still working on it. But yeah, it's so I mean, there's a lot. But I was trying to keep it confined to what's doable in a few days because I don't know how much time the person had.
That's a good idea. Itermagoch also gives 14 Rand. Thank you very much for the informative chat, they say. Right, Chris, to get back to the topic that we were discussing, something else that is a little bit separate from the Trump administration, but there is a connection, is Elon Musk this year has continued shining a light on what's happening in South Africa. He's been very vocal, but he's been very vocal about South Africa for a while. He has a little bit of a personal connection, maybe a little bit more than a little bit. But his big issue with South Africa is his business, where it is less personal or less of just a personal connection to South Africa, but rather a business opportunity for him, and something that he wants to do here in South Africa is he wants to launch Starlink here. He doesn't have to. He has enough other countries where he can launch or has already launched Starlink, but he wants global coverage for Starlink, so he would like it to be in every country and available to everyone. But his big problem with South Africa is the fact that he can't launch Starlink in South Africa at the moment because SpaceX, that owns Starlink, is not black enough in regards to its ownership, because it doesn't meet the race criteria of the South African government. So Elon Musk just said, well, I'm not going to bend the knee to the South African government's race-mad policies. And now South Africa doesn't have Starlink. Zimbabwe has Starlink. Lesotho has Starlink. The majority of Africa has Starlink, or at least a Starlink launch date in the near future. But South Africa has none, because we have a race-mad regime that doesn't care about people getting internet access in a country that still has a lot of rural areas that desperately need reliable internet access, especially for security reasons, where if you have a reliable internet connection on your farm, you can very quickly call for help, coordinate with your neighbors. It's a very valuable resource to have. And that's not even talking about the automation technology that's coming into the market, where you can automate large parts of your farm if you can cover your farm with Wi-Fi signal.
Well, you make a very good point. The thing here is the cheek of South Africa's government constantly complaining about other countries intruding into their sovereignty, which is fiction. To tell an American registered company that in order to operate in South Africa, to have a license there, you have to give up 30% of your equity to someone based on their skin color, not based on their talent or equity they put into the deal or skills they bring to it or access to the marketplace where they can get you in. You just have to give people because they're Well, as we saw in Lethal Weapon 2, but you're black. you know, I mean, that's ludicrous. I mean, this is an American company, American talent, American skills developed this global network of interconnectivity with rapid high-speed internet access, and they want to dictate to us that we have to give up our equity. What if I'm a shareholder in Starlink? Why should I have to give my equity up to somebody in South Africa that's black? Why should I give up to someone who's white in South Africa? That's immoral. That's immoral. That's simply wrong. If this was reversed and it was the National Party, they'd be losing their minds. But they say it's just balancing the scales. No, it's enriching the cadres. That's what it's all about. It's about naked political power, self-enrichment, and self-aggrandizement. And if I was Starlink, I'd say screw South Africa, which is basically what they've done. To be fair, Starlink has never applied for a license through ICASA, but that's because they know it'll be denied and they're not going to give up their equity. It's a waste of their time and money. So I don't blame them.
Yeah, and Elon Musk has been very vocal. He's been challenging President Cyril Ramaphosa directly on X, asking him, why does your country have racialized ownership laws? And also sharing AfriForum's documentary. So AfriForum made a documentary earlier this year simply titled, Is Trump Right About South Africa? And that in that documentary, we interview experts on the main issues that Donald Trump cares about in South Africa. For example, and it's not an exhaustive list, but the main ones are the Expropriation Act, the threat to private property rights, farm murders and kill the boer, and these racialized laws and these racially discriminatory laws that affect American companies specifically. And that's why it's important to Donald Trump, but also being wrong on in a moral sense. But these issues are explored in that documentary, and then Elon Musk, I don't know how he got the documentary, but he shared it, and it gave the documentary 45 million views. That's almost the population of South Africa. And it also earned us a fact check from News 24, but it's behind a paywall, so I'm not going to go read what their fact check was. It's probably just a vibe-based analysis saying this doesn't feel right. This claim by AfriForum doesn't feel correct. That's probably what the entire fact check was going to boil down to. Or this contradicts the ANC's narrative, so that can't possibly be true. I just saved you a News 24 subscription, by the way. That's how their fact checks go.
Well, I do have a News 24 subscription. I do read their garbage, and I have read their fact checking. Their fact checking is comical. I have had to fact check their fact checking because it's factually incorrect on multiple occasions. It's just self-serving. It's not honest. It's not legitimate. An organization shouldn't be fact checking itself. It should do that as part of its publications. That's what editors are supposed to be for. And the bile that gets published as news and News 24 on their news pages is just pathetic. You know, I got to give credit here. So I call News 24, I renamed them Cockprot 24. I renamed the Daily Maverick the Daily Shitbird, and I've renamed IOL the Toilet Paper of Record. But I have to give IOL credit. While they still run some absolutely ridiculous stories, I think Iqbal Survey is reading the tea leaves and sees that the sentiment may be changing, because they have been publishing genuine news stories of late and actually reporting facts, including the murder of Mike Pryor, the farm murder. They covered that story. They were the only newspaper that brought that story out immediately when it came out over the weekend. He was abducted from the Kwaheri farm in KwaZulu-Natal, and then his remains were found burned in his car. So we don't know if he was murdered or burned alive, but they're actually making an effort to cover stories. They have been objective in some of their coverage of Trump, which I've seen nowhere else. The Daily Shitbird doesn't do it. Cockprot 24 doesn't do it. So it's interesting to see that actually happening. So, you know, it's the bottom line here is that the media in South Africa is abysmal. There are very few genuine journalists. The Peter Bruces and Peter Bruces just don't exist anymore. They still exist, but I mean, there aren't many people like that left. You know, the Helen Zillas who exposed how Steve Biko was murdered by security forces. Those people, if they're there, they're not publishing much.
And then also moving on from Elon Musk, something else then, one of the other highlights of this year on this topic of the United States and South Africa was the announcement of tariffs. And I'm not calling it a highlight in the sense that it's a positive thing. It's just one of the major developments that stand out. Chris, for those who maybe are unaware, I know you explain it constantly on your channel, but maybe if there is anyone in the audience that's unaware, what is the situation currently with the tariff situation regarding specifically South Africa and the United States as we stand here in November 2025?
Well, in order to explain that, I have to give a little bit of background. So President Trump came into office and he talked about how America is getting screwed, how we're not getting fair trade. We hear all this nonsense about fair trade, but it's always in the other direction. Fair trade for coffee growers in Colombia, so they get Starbucks is all proud that they pay X number of dollars per pound for it. That's all fine and dandy. But the reality is that virtually every country around the world has barriers to U.S. goods and service. We have the best goods and service, particularly when it comes to technology and medicine and diagnostic equipment and things like that. But we are prevented from getting into markets. There's a reason why American cars aren't sold in many countries, because they won't let them in. Well, that's not fair, because we let these countries into our market. So South Africa was one of 90 countries that received reciprocal tariffs that were announced in April, but delayed until August. And South Africa received a 30% tariff. There was a lot of complaining about all they did was this basic, elementary formula. They took this, they took that. It doesn't really matter. The bottom line is this: 30% is quite generous, given the fact that South Africa blocks most of our goods from going into South Africa. And even where it's not an official policy or a tariff, there are artificial barriers put in place. Let me give an example of this. Temu and Shein send crap to South Africa every day, and they don't pay any tax because they claim it's less than 50 Rand. But they're sending stuff that costs hundreds of Rand through the mail, and they get away with it through the complicit actions of the South African delivery services and the South African government and the revenue service. They just let it happen. Meanwhile, I sent a box to South Africa with 6 Trump hats in it that I got for $10 a piece. That's $60, and some packets of pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks for someone. I mailed that through DHL. It was in South Africa the second day. It cost me $312 to ship it, US. Now, it didn't come. These people, these telemarketers, man, I'm just going to get on a roof with a deer rifle. It's like the 15th call today. Anyway, so I mailed it there. I was reimbursed by the people who wanted the stuff, but the goods were worth $75 US. Okay. I declared that. They arrived, and it took 6 weeks before it got out. And then the people who picked up the goods paid the equivalent, if I recall correctly, of about $400 in fees to bring it in the country. $75 worth of goods from a private shipment, while Temu and Shein send billions of dollars of garbage through the mail. This is what they do to American products. I'm not a business. I'm just a private person. It was a gift. It should have had no duty on it. But this is what they do. Imagine what they do to our consumer goods arriving in the ports. They hold them up at the port. They demand this ransom. It is what happens in South Africa, and the tariffs are a consequence of that. Now, what happened is that the government of South Africa claims that they're negotiating to get the tariffs down, which have been in effect since about the 9th of August. But that's a lie. That's a total lie. They're not here. They are in Vietnam, dancing the night away. They're in China, dancing the night away. Parks, Tao, Ronnie Lamola, and John Steenhuisen. They're not in America. South Africa.
Chris, every week I read an article saying that they are on the cusp of an agreement. I mean, the South African media told me this.
Yeah, I know. It's a lie. So what happened on Friday? Trump says, guess what? No U.S. officials go to the G20. Bad things are happening in South Africa. Whether Trump's right or not, that should be a pretty clear message that if that's how Trump feels, do you honestly think that Trump would approve a trade deal with South Africa? Because South Africa has not addressed any of the things you mentioned earlier that were mentioned in the Oval Office. It's out there for the public to see. We want expropriation rescinded. We want property rights protected. We want to know what you're going to do about this kill the Boer and this racial threat to murder South Africans based on skin color. And we want our companies exempted from your racist expropriation laws of their equity. We're not giving 30% of Sprint or T-Mobile or Xfinity or Ford to people because of their skin color. That's not going to happen. It's very simple. They're lying to the public, and they think people are stupid. And you know what? A lot of people are stupid, so they believe it. But there's no negotiation. And I confirmed that again through sources today in Washington, D.C. There's the people in Washington are like, what are they talking about? We're not talking to them. They're not here. Nobody from the embassy of South Africa is coming over and talking to us. They say they're talking to the trade representative. They had a VTC, a video teleconference with them. That's not talking. You talk to people in person. You negotiate in person, especially when you have the world's most successful negotiator. But they're not doing that. And this is all just smoke and mirrors. Now,
you know what an investigative journalist with their salt would do, Chris? They'd actually follow up on the story and expose that the South African government is actually, as a matter of fact, not on the cusp of a deal. They're not even present in the room where the deal is being made. But that's not what we're getting. We're getting just these fluff pieces of how the South African government are just doing their best, and they're doing so fantastically well. If it wasn't just just wasn't for those dastardly AfriForum and Solidarity villains, treasonous people that keep just messing up everything. It wasn't for those meddling civil society organizations, those meddling Afrikaners, everything would be fine and dandy.
Well, and every time you think there's a chance to look, I'm actually in communication with some people, not in government, but I am also people in government, but people in the periphery and other organizations, trade unions and civil organizations that are on the political left in South Africa who want to repair the relationship. These people are exasperated. And I have this conversation back and forth. Hey, look, I get this. Here's the link. Check this out. It's looking good. The Trump administration said this. And then a couple of days later, I said, yeah, that's true. But look at this. Fikile Mbalula opened his mouth up. He called Trump a racist. Look at this. Ronnie
Lamola claiming that the Trump's Afrikaner refugees arrived in the United States and started killing each other. His words, his direct quote.
A total lie based on, see, this shows the stupidity of these people. So I had a conversation earlier with some, I don't want to say young, they weren't that young, but up and coming YouTube or social media content creators. We were doing a session earlier. And I talked about, you've got to be able to evaluate things. That came from a news report that an American former soldier who hooked up with a South African in Dubai, they met there, they got married. They came to South Africa, they got married there so she could come to America. They came over, he murdered her in Virginia. So a U.S. national murdered a South African national that was his wife. It happened after a couple weeks after refugees began arriving. So because the South Africans involved, idiot media in South Africa are too lazy to check the facts, and they reported that refugees were killing each other. That was spread over social media. And it shows you the very people in the ANC who claim that Trump gets his intelligence from social media are the ones who get their information from social media, because it was bullshit. There was no truth to it whatsoever. I had to refute this instantly. All you had to do was look at the local newspapers and watch the video on the television station in Virginia. What happened here? We have the name of the individual involved. This guy and his wife had a bizarre relationship, and he murdered her. It's true. A South African got murdered, but not by refugees. And all this story about this nonsense now, you get this from Tom Eaton. He's another idiot out there. The Dan Cordes, the Tom Eatons, the Peter Dutoys, the Adrian Bassons, the George Clausen. These people are insane. So Eaton is saying that the only this many people gone over. Okay, the program is frozen. It was a pilot program. And he's saying 16 out of every 100,000 Afrikaners want to participate in this program. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know the number of people that applied. I don't know the true number. I know the estimate based on information I have, anecdotal information, which I can use to analyze multiple data points. Doesn't mean I'm correct, but it sure as heck is not 16 out of every 100,000 Afrikaners. I mean, right now I can tell you that well over 1,000 people, probably as many as 1,500 or 1,800 are already waiting for the government to reopen. And as soon as it does, boom, 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 there'll be hundreds of South Africans coming over here. And even if they want to talk about few coming over, the Trump administration has decided to limit the number of refugees coming to America this year to just 7,500, which is a historical low since 1980. So the max that come over 7,500. Then they're going to say, well, there's no interest in it. Well, there's still a backlog of people that have expressed interest and applied to the program. I mean, look, every day on my program, I get more and more people talking about, did my medicals, did this, came there. And I'm talking about broadcasts that have 500 to 1,500 people on it. Look, my viewers are not just refugee aspirants. They're all kinds of South Africans. There's a lot of interest in the program. I'm not encouraging anybody to leave, but I am encouraging South African officials to tell the truth. They should be terrified. And even if there was no refugee program, 82 South Africans every day abandon that country and move abroad because they can't get work, because they're discriminated against, because it's unsafe, because of collapsing infrastructure, all these reasons. So 82 South Africans. And these aren't poor, toothless oaks who can't get a job. These are people with skills. Lawyers, doctors, attorneys, nurses, educators, business entrepreneurs, moving and enriching the economies of the UK, of France, of Japan, of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, and Ireland.
That can't be true, Chris, because Fikile Mbalula said that these are all car guards. That's what he said, so it has to be true.
No, that's the refugees that are car guards.
You mentioned earlier that what these Marxists or communists do is they accuse you of what they do. So it is. I haven't thought about it that way. That they are actually getting their information
they are the car guards
from their social media feed.
No, they are. I mean, and that's the perfect example. That story. People see. This is why I don't. People come on my chat a lot of time. Hey, Colonel, did you hear about this? And I'm like, why haven't you done a video about this? So-and-so did a video. Because I don't have sufficient information that I believe is trustworthy to tell the story. And that's particularly sensitive when it comes to farm murders. because if I get the story wrong, then they're going to try to tarnish my reputation. So the person's been murdered. Me reporting on it is not going to bring them back to life. Me reporting on it accurately is going to get the message across, but I've got to wait. And it's the same thing with a lot of these things. I almost never jump the gun, but I'm oftentimes ahead of the news. I mean, this morning I had Jakob Kleinhans on. I interviewed him before any other media to talk about these adverts. They're being torn down. But you know the problem with the adverts. You know what it is, Ernst, right? You know what it is? The ANC. You can't handle the truth.
Well, Chris, that's the thing, that if you analyze the ANC in a psychological way in 2025, they're not reacting as someone who knows that they have truth on their side. Someone who knows that they have truth on their side when they are presented with a lie or when they are lied about can simply refute the lie calmly by presenting the truth, because that's how the truth works. But that's not what they're doing. They're screaming misinformation. They're screaming lies, 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 dishonesty, disinformation. They even have launched a treason investigation into those speaking the truth, AfriForum and Solidarity. That investigation is ongoing. And maybe we should address the ANC cadre that's listening in at this moment. I know they are. Your response has been that desperate and hysterical, Mr. ANC cadre, because AfriForum, Solidarity, Chris Wyatt and others are in fact speaking the truth, and you know it. That's why you are reacting so desperately, so angrily, tearing down banners, censoring, trying to take away people's voices. The unfortunate thing for the ANC is that, unfortunately, they are still stuck in the Cold War. So their idea of how you suppress the truth is still based on this paradigm of you suppress truth through like very crude physical means, through like tearing down billboards and intimidating people physically. But that's not how it works in 2025. In the digital era, truth is being spread online. So when you tear down a billboard, as they did, people share that billboard online, and it's getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of more views than it would have gotten if it had been stayed up for a month next to the freeway. I mean, my single tweet, and I saw thousands upon thousands of tweets posting that billboard photograph. My single tweet got 500,000 views on X. That's one platform. And I mean, I don't think 500,000 people would have driven past that billboard. No. Even if 500,000 people...
20,000 per day. That's what go by the billboard.
And how many of that 20,000 would have actually seen and read the billboard and made an impression on them? Based on people,
4,000 maybe might have noticed it. Maybe about 200 or 100 would have taken a photograph and put it on social media, and then it just would have been called racist, and that would have been the end of the story.
Yeah, but the people seeing it trend on social media, the people that are engaging with the story are, of course, internalizing, taking in the information that they're seeing and actually engaging with the information, commenting on it, participating in the debate. It's just been an absolute gift to AfriForum and Solidarity, the reaction from the ANC, the desperate reaction from a party that very clearly, a party and its allies who are very clearly not on the side of truth. And that's the difference between the two parties. On the one side, you have the ANC who lie awake at night thinking about how they can suppress the truth more effectively. And then you have AfriForum and Solidarity and other friends and allies of ours who lie awake at night thinking about more creative and effective ways to get the truth out there. I know in which camp I prefer being.
Yeah, so I got to address a comment here from Lobro Mkati. I don't know if you're being funny or you're just making a statement. He says you just can't make claims without proof. I clearly don't know about loving life. Oh, I do know about loving life. They slander me, claiming I work for the CIA. I wish I worked for the CIA. I could use the money, but no, it just shows you how dumb these people are. They're not very smart. They're not very astute, because they it was obvious that was the wrong approach to that. And also shows you just what hypocrites they are. They talk about, about free speech and putting posters up all over the place of free Palestine, blanking the streets of South Africa, putting these obnoxious things up. And then when someone puts up a sign that actually states the truth, it's the most race-regulated country in the world, which is a fact. And here, their language keeps changing. They think they're getting clever and being nuanced. Like I said, they're taking the white genocide narrative that they're pushing, the politicians and the media, and trying to say Afrikaner persecution now. They're doing it very quickly. Notice that. Watch that come out now. They'll try to equate the two and say they're synonymous. Now they're using many other things that they try to change things around. So like, for instance, now instead of calling you a racist, well, you oppose transformation. Well, hell yeah, because transformation is racist. It's a dog whistle for black supremacy. It's not transformation. The country has been transformed from an upper middle income country with Third world development in much of the country, but much of the country was first world. It's been transformed into a collapsed state where the trains don't work, where the potholes are in the road, where the markets don't work, where companies delist and go to Europe, where everything is falling apart, where crime is rampant. Gangsters run the construction industry. They run the taxi industry. The country is going backwards. 0.9% GDP growth, which is now being trimmed to 0.5 because of the tariffs from the U.S. That's how big an impact the U.S. has had on South Africa's economy. And on top of that, population growth and inflation are larger. So you're going backwards. Your country is regressing. It's not advancing. And this is after 30 years of ANC rule. This is, I mean, so they're changing the narrative. They're trying to, but they're not that clever. It's not going to work.
Yeah, and Chris, I always ask these, I call them the pro-discrimination South Africans, all these people that support these race laws, just call them what they are, and they freak out completely. No, I'm not pro-discrimination. Well, no, you are. You just call it positive discrimination. I always ask them why they can't call it for what it is, because they always use these euphemisms: redress, transformation, affirmative action, all these things, because they use these euphemisms because they know what it is, and they know the moment that they start calling it what it is, racial discrimination by the government, then their whole facade is exposed, and then they will actually start questioning themselves, because then they can't lie to themselves anymore that they're supporting something good, they're supporting something evil. But what I find funny is I always ask them, can you clarify, please? Does South Africa, in fact, not have racial laws, or does it, but they're a good thing? And then the conversation just ends because they can't answer the question.
Well, you're 100% correct. And that's what I'm getting at is this use of terminology to deflect from the topic at hand. So, years ago, I started seeing car sellers in America stop saying used cars. It used to be used car lot. Well, that developed a negative connotation apparently for some people. So suddenly they were previously owned automobiles.
Right.
They give euphemisms, and that's what they're trying to do here to distract from the reality here. But when you put the facts on the table, they can't refute it. Not once have they ever said there aren't any race-based laws, because they can't. It's a lie. So they talk about transformation and how evil apartheid was. You know what? Who cares at this stage? You've owned this economy for 31 years now. 31 years.
Oh.
And what have you done with it?
Lasted for about 40 years, if not less, if you count to when heavy reforms started coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it started in 1948 legally, technically, and it ended by 92. So no, soon the ANC will have ruled longer. It's like the ZANU-PF. It won't take long before ZANU-PF rules longer than Rhodesia. Well, they've already ruled longer than Rhodesia was a country. It was a colony. But it's really sad to see this, because South Africa has such incredible potential. Human capital. It once had great universities, but the universities are a joke now. None of them, only one rates in the top 200 around the world, and I think that was a gift. I don't think even any university in South Africa rates in the top 200, in my view. They've just destroyed education at every level. They've destroyed the infrastructure. They've stolen. They've pilfered. They've allowed gangsters to take over the cigarette industry, like gangsters to take over the construction industry, gangsters to take over the taxi industry. And now we're finding out that apparently gangsters are, the best buds of top police officials. We got politicians, Kenny Kanani, hanging out with gangsters, accused murderers, and he's back on the council and he's running for mayor. I mean, what the hell is wrong with this country? This country needs an enema.
Chris, the last topic before we start wrapping up that I want your thoughts on, and I think this is where the whole 2025 episode of this series kind of is at the moment, the latest episode, and that is the G20 summit. It's in just over a week. It's going to be taking place here in South Africa. South Africa is the host, but the head boy is not going to be attending the matric farewell. The United States is not going to be there, which makes it particularly awkward because the South Africa is supposed to ceremonially hand over the presidency of the G20 to the United States. So can you just share some of your thoughts there in regards to, because maybe just a little bit of a footnote there before you share your thoughts. I've been hearing from a lot of Afro-Marxists and pro-discrimination South Africans is this is not a big deal. G20, the show will go on. It's not a big deal that Donald Trump is there, while simultaneously the people who allegedly misled Donald Trump into not attending should be tried for treason, but it's not a big deal. The people who misled him are treasonous, but it's not a big deal that he's not going to be there. That's the contradiction that's constantly at play at the moment. But is it a big deal?
It's a huge deal. It's an incredible diplomatic insult to South Africa, and to characterize as anything else would be wrong. That's what it is. That doesn't mean I support or defend or oppose it. I'm just stating the facts. This, I mean, of course, people know that I've served in multiple embassies throughout my career, including 8 in Africa that I served in, and I've worked in over 40 embassies around the world. And I've moved in circles with international organizations, the United Nations, the African Union, the European Union, and countries on a bilateral basis, and of course in the diplomatic community. This is, excuse me a second here, this is essentially an affront to South Africa, and it should be viewed by South Africa as that. I mean, if I were South Africans, I would view it as an affront, but there's a reason for the affront. It's justified. And, it's not just Trump that's not coming. Now it's announced today in news in Argentina that Javier Milei is also not coming to the summit. So that's 2 heads of state that won't be coming. And oh, by the way, where does South Africa get off acting like it's their G20? I realize it's a rotating presidency of this group, but we created the G7. We, the United States, created that organization, and we expanded to the G20, allowing countries like South Africa to come. God bless, this phone has rang 3 times in the last 10 seconds, allowing South Africa to enter our tent. And now they have the audacity to spend this year, which is supposed to be about advancing the economic interest of the global economic powers and coordinating activities, reducing tariffs, harmonizing trade. They're spending it talking about solidarity and equity and debt forgiveness and what we're going to do to help Africa. Well, that's not the role of the G7, the G20. And quite frankly, South Africa is not getting the message. I would hope at this point that more leaders don't go. It would be great to see if the UK doesn't go. If Carney was smart, if Carney wants to curry favor with Trump, he won't go. He won't go. That would be smart of Carney from Canada, because Canada's economy is collapsing. Their jobless rate is starting to soar. Their GDP is starting to collapse this year, no growth, because of the tariffs that Trump has slapped on them for their trade practices. And the funny thing is that 87% of Canadian goods and services are exempt because they're covered by the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. So the tariffs that Trump has imposed are only hitting 13% of the goods and services come into here. And look at the impact they're having on Canada. But Canada is being just obnoxious. And so that's what's happening. Not the Canadians, but the government. So you would think that the South African government would get the message, but they don't. They just blithely move on. And this is a tragedy for South Africans, because the 30% tariffs have cost people money, jobs, and businesses are going to collapse as a result of this. And it's all because of the arrogance and the behavior of the African National Congress and the failure of them to get the message about Trump not coming. It's just being dismissed like, oh, we don't need Trump here. Oh, but you do. But you do.
Yeah. Chris, my final question to you is more of a hypothetical one, but I know you've got some very interesting insights here as well. If I were to, let's say you are now appointed as the advisor to the South African government in regards to how to normalize this relationship between the United States and South Africa, again, how to salvage the situation. You don't have to give a quick fix. You can give a time frame to them, but what would your advice be to the South African government? You've got a blank check, metaphorically speaking. You can suggest anything. You can give them the hard truth, even if they don't want to hear the truth. But what would your advice to them be as an advisor in this situation?
First out of the gate, get a ball of masking tape and stick it in Fikile Mabalula's mouth, Paul Mashatile's mouth, and also Ronnie Lamola's mouth. Then stop the public announcements attacking the U.S. If you're going to do things with Cuba, don't make a big deal about it. If you're going to talk about, things you're doing with Iran, that's your prerogative. You're a sovereign state. But don't send your senior general, the army chief, to Tehran to talk about the great military ties. These are affronts to the United States. Stop doing things intentionally to insult the United States. That's what they've done all year long. And they act like it's like there's no consequences. There are consequences to actions. Your actions, for years you've gotten away with it, but that isn't the case anymore. And if you don't like Trump, then, swallow your pride. Be quiet for a couple of years. Trump will be gone. The situation may change. Maybe you can go back to being asses in a couple of years, but stop being asses now. That's what I would tell them. I said, listen, what you need to do is appoint an ambassador. And look, I'm not saying it's the best choice, but I mean, somebody like Tony Leon, he's not an ANC guy. He was at the DA. He was the ambassador to Argentina under the ANC. Send him to DC. He knows how diplomacy works. I'm not saying he's the right guy, but I'm saying something like that. Do that. Get an ambassador there. Start talking. Get a trade negotiator, appoint a trade negotiator. Maybe it'll be, what's his name? The guy that, lives in the Western Cape with his doors and windows open at night. Maybe he can do it. He's a billionaire. Anyway, so, whatever the case is, get a trade negotiator over there and stop misleading people. Focus on issues that matter and stop doing things intentionally to provoke the bear. You've been poking the bear, and now you're paying a price. And also, when it comes to the tariffs, be honest about it. This is what I would say. If I was doing a press release to say, let's talk about the tariffs. It's unfortunate that President Trump felt the need to impose reciprocal tariffs, but we understand why. In the past, we've had tariffs on some U.S. products, but you have to understand we have a small economy, and it was a measure to protect our economy. Whether that's right or wrong, that's what we're trying to do. We had good intent. We understand the United States positions, and we're willing to work issues to reduce those barriers that we've created for U.S. products, but we'd like some understanding. We can't have 200,000 automobiles flood our market from America. We already get that from China. Don't put that in there. So we can't have you flood our market. We like to open our market up to you. We want to do business with you. We will address these issues because, frankly, the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Constitutional Court declared kill the boar hate speech 22 years ago. And we'll ask the courts to revisit that. And we will admonish people and say, you shouldn't do that. Because that's not the spirit of Ubuntu. And we care about everybody being united. So we agree with President Trump that people shouldn't be singing that. And we will look into the issue of rural insecurity. We disbanded the commandos because we didn't feel they served a purpose. But in retrospect, they did play a role in keeping rural security better in South Africa. So we'll look at that. And we promise to prioritize farm attacks because it is a major issue. And food security is critically important. And it's one of our most important exports. We can't have all our farmers and their workers being attacked and murdered. That's not acceptable. So that's what I would tell them to do. They're not going to do any of that. But I mean, at
the end of the day, Chris, at the core of your argument is the situation and the relationship is still salvageable.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, I mean, and I know this. The officials in D.C. are chomping at the bit. I mean, U.S. businesses want to invest in South Africa. I mean, even though the infrastructure is collapsing and crime is out of control, there's still great opportunities. If for no other reason, because South Africa, despite all these woes, is still the most advanced infrastructure and economy on the continent, even with all its problems. And it gives a springboard, certainly into SADC in Southern Africa, but into the continent as a whole. I mean, look at this. Back in the day, the news services would have news bureaus in Lagos, in Addis Ababa, in Nairobi, in Cape Town, and sometimes even in Kinshasa, Stanleyville back in the day. They would have them all over the continent, plus Cairo, they'd have one too. Today, the only place people report in Africa from is Johannesburg. So that just shows you that South Africa still matters from that standpoint. All the news services have collapsed their bureaus because of money, and they only have stringers in those countries. So they only run, CBS has a news operation in Johannesburg. I know, I've met the producer there who came to my Opie Plus event. Anyway, and I also reported on that, the journalist recently who got herself in a little bit of controversy getting fired by CBS. But anyway, so there is interest in the United States, politically and economically. Elon Musk doesn't want to just put Starlink there. I'll bet you he would love to put some data centers in South Africa and leverage it. Amazon wants to put more data centers there and create jobs. But it isn't going to happen unless South Africa's politicians change their ways.
Chris, I think that's a fantastic place to end it. I would just like to thank you very much for sharing your insights here with us tonight, and also having the honor of being my last guest for the year. This is the last episode of Stream of Consciousness for 2025. Still a lot of things that are going to be happening, but they're going to be outside of my YouTube channel for the rest of the year. A lot of things on the agenda. One of them will be, I can't reveal yet what it is, but there's a major revelation or something happening from AfriForum on the 18th of November, and I will be talking to Chris on his channel about that in that week. And then also thank you to your entire audience that came here to listen and with their questions and their comments and their super chats. I really appreciate it. I also enjoy putting their comments on the screen so they can be part of this little time capsule episode as well. They can be immortalized as long as YouTube exists. But Chris, I'm not going to be keeping you for any longer. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And there's probably a lot of content still to be made, a lot of stories to be covered. One of them, for example, is the Malay story of Malay announcing that Argentina is not going to be attending the G20 summit, turning it into the G18 summit. But I don't see that covered anywhere in the English media in South Africa yet. Marula Media has done a story. On the alternative media space, I've seen it covered, but not in the mainstream media in South Africa yet. Maybe they're still waiting for what they should be writing or waiting for their orders in regards to what they should be writing before they post the story. And then finally, thank you very much Also, to my audience that tuned in, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, you can subscribe. And if you're watching and it's no longer live, you can still take part in the conversation by taking part in the comment section. But Chris, once again, thank you very much for your time and insights. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. I enjoy it. Always a pleasure to come on here, and great to see you doing well with AfriForum. You speak very well for the organization. Also, your channel now up over 16,000 subscribers. That's awesome to see because the content is fantastic and insightful. I tried to prompt more super chats. I gave a super chat there.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was hoping that would prompt more, but anyway, I guess my audience is tapped out. So there it is.
No, that's not a problem at all, Chris. Don't worry about it. But yeah, thank you very much again for your time. And if you're in my audience and for some reason don't know who Chris is, and this is the first time that you're seeing him, go check out his channel as well. He does fantastic coverage, not just about South Africa, but also those dynamics between the United States and South Africa, especially the issue of, or the matter of, refugees and refugee status for Afrikaners and other minorities is a major topic on his channel. So if you want to be kept up to date on that topic, he is the guy to go to. So that's where we're going to be ending it here tonight. Chris, have a great weekend ahead of you, and we'll chat again real soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dennis. Cheers.
And cheers to the audience as well. Cheers, guys. Have a good one, and God bless.